Our role within the university is to try to connect the vast talent that we have across all the schools and colleges and try to bring them together in ways, multidisciplinary approaches to understand, to research, and teach about the triple bottom line and how that actually can work in the real world at all scales. Our program has three major areas. We focus on education, research, and outreach. And today is an example of our outreach effort where we try to bring together academics and practitioners so that we can share our worlds in trying to solve these problems.
As an academic, I go to a lot of academic conferences, and I've organized some. I participate on panels and I speak and so forth. And for the most part, they're boring. What mostly happens is that you have somebody speaking to an audience and they passively absorb some information, a few polite questions, and they go home. Most everyone I talk to doesn't like that format. And so what Dick Norton and I came up with was a different format, one that tried to engage people in wrestling with the issue rather than sort of just talking about it or talking to people.
This seemed attractive. The title being, rural-urban interaction, that's basically what Scio Township is, or in between farms and Ann Arbor City, so it seemed very appropriate.
Well, I was inspired when I saw that Jay Williams, the mayor of Youngstown, was on the panel. The conference looked interesting anyway, but because Youngstown has gone through many of the issues that Detroit is suffering on a smaller scale, but the same issues, and they've taken some very innovative and forward-thinking steps to deal with those issues. I wanted to have a chance to meet him and talk a little bit about what Youngstown is doing.
The purpose, again, of this morning session is to kind of lay the groundwork, to lay some context. It's very difficult to separate problems from solutions. They kind of lend themselves to being discussed simultaneously. But we really want to try and use this session to frame the problems, if you will, and then the workshop sessions this afternoon to try and come up with some solutions.
I've seen a recent phenomenon, which is that business leaders who traditionally have not been all that interested in pursuing sustainability are now interested in doing it. And it's the local political leaders who are resistant to the idea, all right? So there's something going on there that we need to understand more. What is it that you think is going to happen to the political leaders to transform those political leaders or leadership from what they are today to a leadership that's going to be supportive of and willing to pursue sustainability?
When you talk about sustainability as it relates to our friends out in the suburbs and the surrounding areas, sustainability is getting them to understand that no matter how much retail and how many big box stores you have, and no matter how many McMansions and things that you find in your community, that you will not be able to continue and exist successfully, sustainably, without a healthy central city. With the mindset that we've left the city, we didn't want to deal with the problems of the city. We left the city 20 or 30 years ago and we're going to isolate ourselves or somehow insulate ourselves from the issues that have faced and oppressed the city is not a sustainable way of thinking, nor is it a way that we can allow to continue.
Sustainability I think of in sort of three terms. There's sort of a general way of viewing sustainability. Strict definition is possible to continue without change with respect to the economic, the environmental, and the social dimensions. I think operationally and sort of in the popular vernacular, it's come to mean minimum ecological footprint. What can we do to try to minimize our footprint on the economy with respect to land, air, water, and energy? And I think, for the most part, that's what's going to dominate our discussion in the next few years. I think operationally, though, and again, this came a little bit out of our climate change conversations, is that it's going to be measured and discussed largely in terms of minimizing greenhouse gas emissions, because that's going to be the hammer, I think, that operates. And greenhouse gas emissions is sort of the penultimate performance measure that I think a lot of us will be judged by.
If we can get the mindset of young people to turn from the so-called American dream, which was really a federally subsidized artificial world, to a different concept of where they want to live and how they want to live, that will naturally lead to greater sustainability, just that step alone.
The group dialogues will be facilitated by graduate students or recent graduates who are trained facilitators by U of M's Center for Research on Learning and Teaching. And there will also be a second graduate student who has studied sustainable development or planning in some form, who will be the designated reporter. So you all don't have to take notes. So you'll have a team of graduate students facilitating and reporting to work through the dialogue for these case materials that we've developed.
I would encourage everyone here to think more ambitiously, because what happened here needs to happen in every nook and cranny in this state. And so we should be thinking about how can we take what's happened here, reshape it, improve it, replicate it, and use it as a template for democracy that can begin to get these bigger systemic problems solved.
The proof will be in the pudding. Right now the participants, the conference folks, are in their workout sessions and plugging away on the session. So we'll see if the panel did what I hope it did, which was to lay a good foundation for them to engage in constructive dialogue. And then we'll see what kind of feedback we hear from the panelists on their observations of this session. So far my sense is this is going pretty well.
The suburbs and the telecommuters and others, they depend intimately on a healthy central city. You can't just sort of empty out the core and expect the periphery to go on its own right. You can't sustain that.
I floated around to most of the groups. I was very impressed with both the engagement and the creativity, the intelligence and the dedication. Not surprisingly, the prescription of density and infill or increased population, very, very common across all, as was the prescription of mixed use, either horizontal or vertical mixed use. Interestingly, one group, in addition to talking about mixed uses, talked about continuing separation of uses. A lot of people focused on the park system, on education. Localized energy, stated by one of the groups, but quite common localized food. Rural township, not surprisingly, very common land use policies to keep it rural tended to be the focus. Then there were regional efforts. Everybody thinks we should do a better job at cooperating, either on services in general or transportation services in particular. Regional Planning Commission, almost everybody thought that was an innovation that was needed in order to bring the various units together. Revenue sharing, a very common idea, and a regional transportation infrastructure authority kind of going along with the Regional Planning Commission. Almost all the groups focused on localism or parochialism as a big hurdle towards achieving sustainability. In terms of our policy steps, 3 of the groups were interested in incentives for young people to stay. 3 of the groups focused on riparian buffer, land use planning for riparian buffer. 3 of the groups mentioned that we need to use existing powers better. And this is a very important idea. Often we assume that we lack the powers to do what we need to do. And when you scratch the surface, you discover, oh no, wait a second. We've got those powers. We must be lacking the political will to make use of those powers, which is a different question entirely. So, is there a commonality? I would say, yeah. I would say broadly this is a regionalist audience. I'd say broadly it's an audience that focuses on compact mixed-use development, that focuses on open space preservation. So I think a lot of the groups had very clear ideas about vibrant cities, and a lot of the groups had very clear ideas about preserved rural areas. What about the suburbs? It's a very, very important issue. What's already developed, what's already suburban, we should look for opportunities to intensify that development. That the suburbs can become more walkable, that the suburbs can become more urban, that the suburbs can become more transit-oriented. So I think it's not just about the hip city and the pastoral countryside. I think the suburbs and how they change and evolve is where a lot of the action is.
The one issue that came up that I thought was most telling, and I think maybe most profound, at least for me, was that the economically smart decision is often not the politically smart decisions. That you may make all the economic arguments that you want for a particular way forward, but often the political will won't follow that.
It's an excellent group of panelists, and then to the workshop, you know, just some good questions and good dialogue with the various agencies and people that were in attendance and represented.
There's a lot of people that understand the climate issues, but even if they don't, they're interrelated enough that there's strong economic argument, there's strong support your local business arguments that all feed into this if you can kind of tell the right local story.
I'm glad that I came to the conference because it was really useful to hear the ideas on local businesses, but I'm also going to be thinking about how land use planning can adapt to the current economic reality that Detroit is facing.